knowing that each blossom was a gift, a reminder that life, like the petals, is ever-changing. The children listened intently, the story weaving threads of comfort through their sorrow. Taro's eyes brightened slightly, and even Kiko's defiance softened as she sat still, wrapped in the warmth of the tale. Afterward, as the children dispersed into the orchard, I remained behind, watching the gentle sway of the apricot branches. The rustling leaves whispered secrets of impermanence and hope. Memory, I realized, was not a chain but a root strong, deep, and capable of nurturing new growth. In the quiet moments that followed, I felt the fragile stirrings of acceptance taking hold, a delicate balance between sorrow and renewal. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in many weeks, I sensed that we might walk it together. Bound by the weight of memory and the promise of the apricot's brief bloom, the orchard, much like the children, was growing silently, patiently, and with a resilience born from the depths of grief. And as the sun dipped beneath the hills, casting long shadows over the land, I whispered a prayer to the unseen. May we find strength in the fleeting, and peace within the impermanent. Yet even as hope began to bud, I knew the journey was far from over. The coming days would test us all in ways we could not yet imagine. But for now, beneath the spreading branches, we held on to each other, to memory, and to the fragile, beautiful promise of tomorrow. The morning air was heavy with a chill that seemed to seep not only through the skin, but through the very bones of the village. Clouds hung low, casting a muted gray light over the apricot orchard, where the saplings stood in neat rows, their fragile branches trembling in the biting breeze. I stood at the edge of the field, watching the children gather reluctantly around the small patch of earth that we had been nurturing together, a symbol of hope, yet fragile as the hearts that tended it. Kiko was the first to break the brittle silence. Her sharp eyes, usually defiant and bright, now glimmered with a storm of emotions that she had tried so hard to bury. "Why do we even bother?" she demanded, her voice slicing through the quiet like a whip. "These trees won't bring back what we lost. None of this will." Her words were a bitter gust against the tender new growth, and I felt the air grow colder still. I approached her slowly, careful not to escalate the simmering tension. "Kiko," I said softly, "these trees are not meant to replace what was lost. They are here to remind us that life continues, even when it feels impossible." She shook her head, stepping back as if my words were a physical blow. "You don't understand. You lost your family, but you still have your memories. I have nothing left but anger and silence. How can you ask me to plant hope when all I feel is emptiness?" Her defiance was raw and unmasked, a mirror to the grief I had hidden beneath my calm exterior. I wanted to reach out, to soothe, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I remained silent, watching as the other children shifted uncomfortably, caught between their own pain and Kiko's fierce resistance. Taro, usually so quiet, stood apart from the group, clutching his sketchbook tightly. His dark eyes flickered between Kiko and me, reflecting a turmoil that mirrored their own. I had noticed his growing distance, the way his art became both a refuge and a prison. His slender fingers twitched as he sketched the scene unfolding before him, the broken branches, the tense faces, the fragile bonds stretching thin. As the argument escalated, voices rose and tempers flared. The orchard, once a safe haven, felt suddenly vulnerable, its delicate buds echoing the fragility of our collective spirit. I felt a familiar ache settle in my chest, the weight of my own sorrow mingling with the children's pain. Was I failing them? Could I lead them through this storm of grief and anger? Or would we all be lost in the aftermath? Just as despair threatened to overwhelm us, a gentle presence emerged from the shadows of the trees. Grandmother Sato's stooped figure approached, her silver hair catching the faint light like threads of moonshine. Her warm eyes, deep with years of wisdom and quiet humor, fell upon the tense group. "Children," she said softly, her voice steady and soothing, "life is like these apricot trees. They bloom and wither, fall and rise again. The pain we carry is part of that cycle. It is not a barrier but a passage to acceptance, to healing." Her words hung in the air, a balm to raw nerves. Kiko's defiance faltered, and she looked away, the sharp edges of her anger blunted by the elder's calm assurance. Taro lowered his sketchbook, meeting Grandmother Sato's gaze with a flicker of understanding. I stepped forward, my own voice trembling with renewed resolve. We are not alone in this. Our grief binds us, but so does our hope. Together, we can nurture more than trees, we can nurture each other. The orchard, battered yet enduring, seemed to breathe alongside us. The fragile branches swayed gently, as if responding to the fragile peace settling in our hearts. Though the fractures were raw, this moment marked the first step toward mending not just the land, but the broken spirits within it. As the day waned, shadows lengthening across the soil, I felt the weight of my mission anew. The path ahead was uncertain, the wounds fresh, but amidst the cracks, light found its way in. And with it, the promise that even in our fractures, we could grow. The orchard stood quiet beneath the gathering dusk, a testament to resilience and the fragile beauty of healing, as if the trees themselves whispered a song of hope that only the broken could truly hear. And still, the question lingered in my mind, could we truly overcome the fractures within ourselves before the next storm came to test us all? The answer I knew would blossom in time. The orchard was no longer just a patch of earth scarred by tragedy. It was becoming a quiet sanctuary where life whispered its tentative return. The apricot saplings, once mere fragile sticks planted with trembling hands, now bore the first signs of awakening. Tiny buds, pale and promising, clung to slender branches like whispered secrets of spring yet to come. I sat among the children beneath the spreading branches, the late afternoon sun filtering through the delicate leaves and dappling our skin in soft gold. The air carried the scent of moist earth and faint traces of apricot blossoms, a fragrance that seemed to mingle with the ache and hope that hovered over us all. Around me, the soft murmur of the village felt distant, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird returning to the recovering land. Taro was nearby, his slender form hunched slightly as he balanced a worn sketchbook on his knees. His charcoal pencil moved with surprising delicacy, tracing the curves of apricot petals that seemed to dance on the page. His dark eyes, usually shadowed with silence, flickered with a fragile light that no one had seen in weeks. Watching him, I felt the slow unfolding of something precious, the first cracks in the walls he had built around his grief. "Taro," I whispered softly, careful not to disturb the fragile piece, "your drawings are beautiful." He glanced up, a faint smile flickering before retreating. "It helps," he murmured, eyes returning to the page. "Sometimes the words get stuck, but the blossoms, they say what I can't." Near the orchard's edge, Kiko stood apart, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her sharp eyes, usually blazing with defiance, were fixed on the young trees with a reluctant softness that betrayed her usual bravado. A gentle breeze stirred the branches, scattering pale petals like whispered memories across the ground. She exhaled slowly, the sound barely audible but heavy with unshed emotion. "Kiko," I ventured, approaching with cautious steps, "the trees are growing, they remember, we remember." She turned to me, her gaze guarded but less rigid. "I don't know if I'm ready to remember," she said, voice low but steady. "Some things feel like they should stay buried." I nodded, knowing the truth of her words. Healing was not a straight path, but a winding road where fear and hope walked hand in hand. "It's okay to be afraid," I said gently. "But the trees teach us that even in winter, life waits beneath the surface." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the orchard, I walked slowly among the saplings. My fingers brushed tenderly over the soft buds, feeling the pulse of life in their fragile forms. The earth beneath them was dark and rich, a promise of renewal despite the scars it bore. "Each bud is a song," I whispered, as if sharing a secret with the wind. "A song of falling apricots, of endings and beginnings entwined." The children gathered closer, their eyes reflecting the fading light and the growing warmth in their hearts. In that silent communion, grief felt less like a heavy chain and more like a thread weaving us together, fragile, yet unbreakable. Taro closed his sketchbook at last, his gaze meeting mine. "Maybe," he said softly, "we can grow, even after everything." Kiko looked up at the sky, where the first stars began to appear. Maybe, she echoed, her voice barely a whisper but carrying a weight of reluctant hope. And beneath the quiet boughs of the apricot trees, I felt it too, the slow, silent growth of something new, fragile yet fierce, promising that even amidst loss, life could bloom again. But the journey was far from over. As the night deepened, a question lingered in the cool air. Would our fragile hope be enough to withstand the shadows still lurking in our hearts, and the unpredictable challenges that lay ahead? The song of falling apricots had begun, delicate and haunting, and we had only just learned to listen. Outside the village, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the weight of memory and the promise of change. Inside the orchard, beneath the tender buds and fragile branches, a quiet revolution was taking root, one of healing, of acceptance, of the gentle courage it took to face impermanence and still choose to grow. The apricot trees stood as silent witnesses to our sorrow and our hope, their silent growth a testament to the resilience of the human heart. And as I looked at the children, at Taro's softening gaze, at Kiko's subtle release of tension, I knew that though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, we had taken a vital step together. The silent growth of the orchard was not just the sprouting of trees. It was the blossoming of something deeper, the fragile, tentative beginnings of new life within us all. And so, beneath the watchful sky, we waited, listened, and hoped for the next chapter waiting to unfold beneath the falling apricots. The morning light spilled softly over the village, filtering through the scattered clouds that lingered like a gentle promise. The once shattered homes now stood as quiet skeletons of resilience, their timbers freshly joined and roofs propped with sturdy beams. Yuki moved among the villagers with a calm authority, his calloused hand steady as he guided the younger men and women in repairing what nature had so ruthlessly taken. Hannah watched from the edge of the gathering, her eyes tracing the slow rhythm of rebuilding, the hammering, the sawing, the careful fitting of each board. It was a symphony of renewal, a collective heartbeat pulsing through the village's veins. She felt the weight of months of sorrow beginning to lift, replaced by a fragile but growing determination. Taro lingered nearby, his slender frame hunched over a small sketchbook. His pencil moved swiftly, capturing the outlines of the new beams and the faces of those around him. Hannah approached, her voice a soft murmur. "Your drawings are beautiful, Taro." He looked up, eyes dark but shimmering with something new, a flicker of trust. "I like to remember the good things," he said quietly. "Like the way the light hits the wood." Kiko stood a little apart, arms crossed, her sharp eyes flicking between the workers and Hannah. The stubborn set of her jaw softened as she observed the steady progress. When Hannah beckoned her over, she hesitated but came, shoulders tense yet open to the possibility of change. "You see," Hannah began, kneeling beside the apricot saplings, "each nail driven into these beams is like a promise. Not just to rebuild walls, but to rebuild lives." Kiko's gaze fell to the tender green leaves of the saplings. "But what if they don't survive? What if everything falls apart again?" Hannah reached out, brushing her fingers lightly along a slender branch. "Then we will plant again, and again. Because in every ending, there is a new beginning." Sora, the youngest of the children, tugged at Hannah's sleeve with a bright smile. "I want to help build, too." Yuki chuckled, his broad shoulders turning as he spotted the small boy. "There's a place for everyone here, Sora. Even little hands can do big things." As the day stretched on, the village became a hive of quiet activity. Mika moved through the groups, her herbal teas and salves offering relief to tired muscles and aching spirits. Her gentle laughter lifted the air, weaving threads of comfort into the fabric of the day. Grandmother Sato sat beneath the shade of a blossoming apricot tree, her silver hair catching the light like a halo. She shared stories of the village's past, tales of ancestors who had faced hardship and loss, yet found strength in the earth and each other. Her voice was a soothing balm, reminding all that they were part of a living chain, unbroken despite the pain. As afternoon waned into dusk, the newly rebuilt homes stood firm, their shadows stretching long and peaceful over the soil. Lanterns were lit, casting warm pools of golden light where neighbors gathered to share food, stories, and laughter fragile and precious as the first blossoms on the apricot trees. Hannah lingered beneath the canopy of leaves, feeling the pulse of life around her. The children came close, their hands dirt-streaked but hearts lighter. Taro showed her the sketches he had made, each line a step toward healing. Kiko, standing beside him, offered a tentative smile, a crack in the armor of resistance. "We were growing," Hannah whispered, almost to herself. "Not just the trees, but us." The village, once broken and silent, now breathed with quiet strength. In the shared labor, the stories exchanged, and the gentle tending of saplings, the people found a new family, one rooted in grief, but blossoming with hope. Night deepened, and as the stars appeared overhead, Hannah thought of the days ahead. The road would not be easy, but gathered strength, like the roots of the apricot trees, would hold them fast through storms yet to come. And in that thought was a seed of peace, waiting patiently to bloom. The days that followed were filled with steady work and quiet moments of reflection. The village, once a place of shattered dreams, began to pulse with tentative life. Children played among the budding branches of the orchard, their laughter a fragile thread weaving through the air. Taro's drawings grew more intricate, the lines capturing not only the shapes around him, but the emotions he could not yet voice. Hannah encouraged his art, sensing in it a bridge between his silent grief and the world he longed to rejoin. Kiko, once so fierce in her denial, slowly lowered her defenses. She helped Yuki fashion supports for the frail saplings, her hands steady though her eyes betrayed lingering fears. When she spoke of her family, it was with a voice softened by acceptance, the sharp edges of loss beginning to smooth. Hannah found strength in their small victories, in the way the community gathered each evening beneath the apricot trees to share stories and dreams. Mika's herbal remedies soothed their wounds, both visible and hidden, while Grandmother Sato's tales wove a tapestry of continuity and hope. The village was no longer a place of endings, but the fertile ground for new beginnings. And as the first petals of the apricot blossoms unfolded, so too did the hearts of those who tended them, fragile, open, and ready to grow. Yet beneath the calm surface, Hannah knew the path ahead held storms both literal and unseen. But for now, in this moment of gathering strength, there was only the soft promise of dawn and the gentle music of life renewed. The song of falling apricots whispered through the air, carrying with it the hope of all who had lost and all who dared to hope again. Even as the village settled into its new rhythm, moments of quiet reflection punctuated the days. Hannah often found herself beneath the apricot trees, watching the children as they tended their fragile charges. Each touch, each whispered word to the saplings was a testament to their growing resilience. One afternoon, as a breeze stirred the orchard, Taro approached her with a sketchbook in hand. "Look," he said softly, opening it to reveal a detailed drawing of the village homes rebuilt. Trees blossoming, children playing. "This is the way I see us now." Hannah smiled, her heart swelling with pride and tenderness. "It's beautiful, Taro. You've captured more than the village. You've captured hope." Kiko, standing close by, nodded. Maybe we really can move forward." The three of them shared a quiet moment, the weight of their shared past balanced by the fragile lightness of the future. In the distance, Yuki hammered the last board into place on a repaired home, his steady rhythm a heartbeat driving the village forward. Mika's soft ladder drifted from the herbal garden, mingling with the rustling leaves. Grandmother Sato watched them all with eyes that had seen many seasons of loss and renewal. "The roots run deep," she said softly to Hannah. "Stronger than any storm." Hannah nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle deep within her. The village was healing, slowly but surely, and in that healing was the quiet strength to face whatever lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the apricot orchard glowed softly in the twilight. Each blossom a fragile beacon of life, each falling petal a whispered promise that even in loss, hope endures. And with that promise, the village breathed anew, ready to face the future together. The late afternoon sun filtered gently through the sparse canopy of apricot branches, casting long, wavering shadows across the soft earth of the orchard. The air was thick with the scent of budding flowers, and the faint whisper of a breeze that stirred the leaves, setting a fragile rhythm to the silence that had settled over the trees. I stood quietly beneath the branches, my fingers brushing tenderly over a cluster of pale blossoms, feeling the fragility of their petals against my skin. It was a moment of delicate stillness, a pause in the relentless flow of days marked by the slow but steady growth of the orchard, and yet, beneath the surface of this calm, a storm was gathering. Kiko's sharp footsteps broke the stillness as she appeared at the edge of the trees, her small frame tense and eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and fear. She stormed towards me, her voice trembling but fierce, shattering the quiet like a sudden crack of thunder. "Why do you make us do this?" she demanded, her words laced with raw pain. "Why do you want us to forget, to pretend like nothing happened?" Her accusation hung between us, heavy and unwelcome. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, the weight of grief that had settled deep within me, since the landslide took everything from us. I had known this moment would come, the time when the children's pain would no longer be veiled by silence or gentle lessons, but would erupt in all its messy, unyielding truth. I took a slow breath, steadying myself against the tide of emotion rising in her voice. "Kiko," I said softly, stepping closer beneath the swaying branches, "I'm not asking you to forget. None of us could. But these trees, they are not a lie, nor a way to erase what we have lost. They are living memories, a way to hold on to those we loved without being trapped in the pain." She shook her head fiercely, eyes glistening. "It's easy for you to say. You had your family. You had." Her voice broke, and suddenly the defiance faltered, revealing a fragile core of fear and sorrow. "How can you stand here and tell me to move on? How can you ask me to plant over their graves like it's some kind of promise?" The words struck me with the force of a fresh wound. I had spent so long holding my own grief tightly, carefully folding it away to be the steady one for the children. But now, looking into Kiko's eyes, I saw my own despair mirrored back at me, the loss, the loneliness, the unbearable ache of absence. I swallowed the lump in my throat and allowed the walls I had built around my sorrow to crumble just enough to speak my truth. "I lost my husband and my parents in the landslide," I confessed, my voice trembling. "Sometimes the pain feels like it will swallow me whole. But these trees, they give me something to hold on to, something that grows even when I feel like I cannot." Kiko's defiance wavered, and for a moment, the sharp edges of her anger softened into something more vulnerable. The tension between us shifted, and the weight of unspoken grief hung in the air like a fragile thread waiting to be pulled. Her shoulders slumped, and tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I'm scared that if I let go, I'll lose them forever." I stepped closer and reached out, resting my hand gently on hers. "You won't lose them," I said quietly. "They live in our memories, in these trees, and in the love we carry. It's not about letting go, it's about learning how to carry the pain with us, so it doesn't break us." The orchard was silent again, save for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of a bird settling for the evening. Petals drifted down like pale snow, settling gently on the earth where we stood. In that quiet moment, the space between us felt lighter, filled with the fragile promise of understanding. We sat side by side beneath the fading light, the sky painted in soft pastels of pink and lavender. The world seemed to hold its breath with us, as if acknowledging the fragile beginnings of acceptance taking root. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, I felt a quiet hope stir within me. The path ahead would not be easy. Grief was a winding road with many turns, but in Kiko's tears, I saw the first glimmers of healing. And in that, the orchard, the village, and I could all find a way forward, rooted in the enduring strength of memory and the tender beauty of impermanence. But even as hope blossomed, a quiet question lingered in the twilight air: could this fragile acceptance endure the coming storms, both within and beyond us? The answer would unfold with the turning of seasons, in the lives we nurtured and the memories we chose to carry. And so, beneath the falling apricot petals, our story continued, uneasy, raw, but alive with the possibility of renewal. The sky had grown heavy, a thickening gray that swallowed the afternoon light. I stood at the edge of the orchard, watching the dark clouds roll over the hills, their swollen bellies pregnant with rain and wrath. A restless wind rattled the fragile branches of the young apricot trees, bending them as though testing their strength. My palms were clammy, but I pressed my hands against the rough bark of a sapling, drawing a quiet breath to steady the rising tension within me. "The storm is coming," I murmured to the children gathered near the footpath, their small faces pale but alert. Taro clutched his sketchbook close to his chest, eyes wide as he followed the shifting shadows above. Kiko stood apart, arms crossed, her jaw tight. Even Grandmother Sato, seated on the bench beneath the old camphor tree, furrowed her brow, her silver hair stirred by the sudden gusts. "We cannot let the orchard be destroyed," I said firmly, turning to face them. "These saplings are more than trees, they are the memory of our lost families, the promise of new beginnings. If the storm tears them down, it will feel as if hope itself is being swept away." Kiko's eyes flashed with defiance. "What if the storm wins? Maybe it's better to accept that some things can't be saved." "That's exactly why we must try," I replied softly, stepping closer. "Because fighting for what matters is how we heal." The villagers began to gather, drawn by the urgency in my voice. Maika arrived with bundles of cloth and herbs, her hands moving swiftly to prepare protective wraps soaked in calming scents. Yuki appeared shortly after, his broad shoulders carrying wooden stakes and tools, his steady presence a quiet reassurance. Together, we formed a circle around the orchard, the children moving alongside the adults, as we worked to brace each tree. I watched as Taro knelt beside a slender sapling, his fingers trembling as he tied a cloth around its trunk. The wind tugged at his coat, but he held firm, his dark eyes focused and resolute. Nearby, Kiko hesitated at the orchard's edge, rain beginning to fall in cold droplets. Slowly, she stepped forward, her hands trembling as she helped secure the protective cloths, her defiance softening into something like acceptance. "It's going to be all right," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. "We will endure this, together." The first rumbles of thunder echoed over the hills as the storm drew closer, but in that moment, beneath the gathering clouds and amid the sheltered trees, we found a fragile strength. Our hands, young and old, intertwined with purpose, our breaths mingled in the cool air, steady and sure. The apricot orchard, our living memorial, stood guarded not just by wood and cloth, but by the unyielding spirit of a community refusing to surrender to despair. Night was falling fast when the first sheets of rain began to hammer the earth, drumming against leaves and rooftops alike. We gathered at the edge of the orchard, eyes scanning the shadows where the saplings bent and swayed. The storm was no longer a distant threat, it was upon us. "Stay close," I urged the children, my voice low but calm. "We will face this night together." Taro's hand found mine, small and trembling but steadying. Kiko, standing beside him, nodded quietly, her earlier resistance melting into a shared resolve. Grandmother Sato hummed an ancient melody, her voice a steady thread weaving through the roar of the wind. As lightning tore across the sky and thunder shook the ground beneath our feet, I held on to a single truth. No matter how fierce the storm, life like the apricot trees would endure. And in that endurance, we would find our way back from the darkness. The night ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in many moons, I felt the fragile stirrings of hope take root inside me. The storm would test us all, but we were ready to fight not just for survival, but for the promise of new beginnings blossoming in every falling apricot. And so, with the tempest raging around us, we prepared to stand guard, united beneath the restless sky. The night descended over the village like a dark curtain, thick with the promise of fury. Hannah stood at the edge of the orchard, her breath catching as the first gusts of wind tore through the fragile branches of the young apricot trees. The sky roared with thunder, and rain began to fall, at first a steady drizzle, then a relentless torrent, drumming on the leaves and earth. The landslide had already taken so much from this village. Now nature seemed bent on testing them once again. Children gathered close, their faces pale and eyes wide. Taro clutched his notebook to his chest, the pages already damp from the rain. Kiko stood nearby, her usual defiant